Alright everybody, and welcome back. It has been a minute, so if this is your first time here at the channel, welcome to the latest episode of Project Looking Glass. In this series, we have been tackling the concepts and mechanics that make an RPG as we progress at making our very own action-adventure game. In our previous episode, we created a light and heavy attack that uses stamina and different animations to show off combat. In today's episode, we will be building on that and adding damage to the attacks, as well as showing how to make objects receive damage. This is going to be a core component of our combat system, and it will lead to us making our very own combat component later on that we can add to different objects so they can receive and deal damage as we see fit. But until then, let's get into it. Alright folks, so in our previous episode where we created our light and heavy attack, we added an ability to sheath and unsheath a weapon, which we tied to a button key binding. I tied it to X on my keyboard. Pressing X will equip our weapon, which in this case is a prototype axe that I wound up creating in a previous episode. You can see it's equipped to the hand. If you left click, it does a fast light attack in front of the player. And right-clicking, holding down right-click, will do a wind-up animation, putting you into this position with the weapon primed behind you before using some stamina and slamming the weapon down in front of you. So that is our light and heavy attack, and you can see it's got a sphere trace. When you hit an object, it will bring back the name of the object up in the top left corner. So you can see I hit the door, I hit the spawn chest, I hit a collectible power. It will tell you exactly what you're hitting, but at the moment it's not doing any damage. In order for us to have a viable combat system, we need this to do some damage. So we're going to get right into that. The first thing that we're going to want to do is decide what is going to do damage. Right now, we have a weapon that we have equipped to our character. So I'm going to want the weapon itself to do damage. That way, when we go to swap weapons on the character, each weapon will have a different damage output. So in order to do that, we're going to go into our weapon prototype. So in our weapon prototype, you can see this is our previous code. I added a little bit of code here, which is just a check to make sure that the overlap capsule on the weapon itself, this cylinder here, that it does not hit the player or the weapon and trigger the sphere trace. So in order to do that, I did a check to see if the player is attacking. And if the player is attacking, it's going to check to see if the overlapping actor is the weapon itself or the player. And if it is not the weapon or the player, then it will do a sphere trace. So because of these two bits of code, it will only do a sphere trace when the player is attacking, and it will only activate the sphere trace if it's hitting something other than the weapon or the player. So the sphere trace was how we were deciding what object was being hit before. We did the sphere trace for objects at the location of the hit. Ignoring the player pawn, this wasn't working too well, so I did add that check at the beginning. But out of hit, we did a break hit result, and we're getting the name of the actor that we're hitting off of hit actor. This is how we're going to be applying damage. So in order to apply damage, all we need to do is go into our blueprint, right click on empty space, and type in apply damage. And this is the node that we're going to want for it. So we're going to add this to our code right now. We're going to take the hit actor and we're going to plug it into damaged actor. So now whatever we hit is going to receive damage. We can also set base damage and the damage type if we want. We can also do damage causer, but I don't think we're going to need that. Actually, I do believe that we're going to need that. Coming off of damage causer, we are going to do a self. Get a reference to self. There we go. So the weapon itself is doing the damage. Now I do have a variable, attack damage. We're going to use this. We're going to get and plug it directly into base damage. I already have this set to 5 damage, so when this applies, it will do 5 points of damage to whatever it hits. We don't need a damage type because this is more for if you were to do spells or a weapon that has an element effect on it, you would apply like fire, impact, slashing. If you have different damage types in your game, this is what you would use to do different damage resistances. But since we're early into this, we're not going to need this. So we're going to compile, save, and now we're going to need to create an object that receives this damage. So right now we have a couple of objects that don't receive damage or shouldn't receive damage, like the door or the player, but we want something that will show off damage. So I created this exploding object over here. And all this is, it's just a glowing barrel box, and what it should do, if this works correctly, is upon receiving damage, it will lose health, which I've got set to 1 right here, and once this hits 0, it should explode. And I can show you the code for that real quick. Explode, custom event, get the actor location, apply radial damage and impulse. A spawn emitter at the location for the explosion itself. A sound at the location for the explosion. Fire off an impulse, radial force, so it pushes the player away at a radius of 500. And then it destroys the actor, the exploding object. Alright, so we are going to want to do an event AnyDamage. So we're going to right click an empty space, we're going to do an AnyDamage node. Event AnyDamage. And on event AnyDamage, this is how we are going to apply the damage that we receive. So we're going to take the damage that we receive, and we're going to want to subtract it from our health. So we're going to take our health node, which is only 1. We're going to take health, we're going to subtract, and we're going to plug in damage. Alright, so now when we receive damage, it will check how much damage we are taking, subtract it from our overall health. But we want this to stay above, or we want this to be capped at 0. So off of the return value, we are going to do a clamp float value. And this is how you prevent it from going below or above a certain value. Our maximum health is set to 1, so I'm just going to leave this as 1. And we're going to keep it clamped to 0. That way it doesn't go below that and cause any issues. And then we're going to set the value of our health, plugging in the return off the clamp float and setting it as a variable there. Now that that's all taken care of, we can call the explode function right here. So we are going to, actually, before we do that, I'm going to do a check real quick. We're going to come off of health, and we are going to do a check of less than or equal to 0, branch. This is just to make sure everything is copacetic here. And then if true, we're going to do the explode. There we go. Now that should work. So if we go into our character, we come over to this exploding object and we hit it, it explodes. But if you look over here, we are actually hitting multiple times with each object. So we're going to fix that too. So in our weapon, we're going to apply this bit of code here. This is something that I figured out. This is a quick fix. It's not perfect, but it should prevent the weapon from hitting multiple times with each swing. So we're going to take this code and plug it in to the execution of apply damage. So once the object applies damage, it will turn off the collision of our capsule component. So it will turn off the collision of the weapon's hitbox, and it won't cause it to play the sphere trace anymore. So now that that's taken care of, if we play it, it should only hit 1 time. Just like that. Now the issue is it doesn't turn back on. So we're going to add another bit of code. I actually added it over here on our attack code right here. Light and heavy attacks. So on the light attack, it's actually easier to see. We do our enhance input action after we apply the damage. We're going to set is attacking, and we're going to play a montage. Before we play the montage, we want to turn our collision back on. So we're going to go ahead and plug this in, and how I did this, we have a component for the weapon equipped, which we did for the, not the interact, where was it? Stamina sprint system, there it is. Unsheath and sheath weapon, we have a weapon equipped. This is how we are creating the weapon and adding it to our player hand. So I took this variable, which gets a reference to whatever weapon is currently set to the character, got the capsule component, and set the collision. And we did the same thing for the attack damage. So for our light attack, we're doing the 5 damage, which is base. And then for the heavy attack, I have it set down here for 50 points of damage. No, never mind, that's stamina. Where's my heavy attack? There it is. No, where'd it go? There it is. Weapon equipped, set attack damage to 15. So it does 3 times the amount of damage when you go to do a heavy attack as compared to a light attack. And I set this after we check to see that the player has a weapon. That way when we go to play the charge animation, it's already setting the amount of damage we're going to do with the weapon itself. But we're going to set collision down here in our heavy attack action. So right after we decide that we're going to attack, we're going to set our collision enabled using the weapon equipped variable, getting the capsule component, and setting collision. So this overrides what's happening in the weapon and turns this back on so we can hit more than once, but we only hit once with each swing. And we can show that here with a weapon. Hits 1 time, once, there we go. And with the weapon and a heavy attack, it will only hit 1 object. I did notice that it hit the door on the swing because I was standing too close to it, but overall, this is a fairly simple piece of code that prevents that. And we still get the explosion. Alright folks, so that concludes our video on adding damage to your character and your attacks. So in this video we went over how to apply damage to your attacks, in our case by using an apply damage node on the weapon itself, and we also showed a fix for the previous issue of the weapon hitting multiple times with each swing. We showed how to make objects receive damage from the weapon as well, and we showed how we can change the damage output based on what type of attack we're using. This is the first step towards creating a very dynamic combat system where we will be able to add multiple types of weapons to the game, with each weapon having a different amount of damage that it would do, as well as different animations for the player to use. If you enjoyed this video, or you found it useful, hit the like button and subscribe to stay up to date on our upcoming videos. Our next video is going to be a bit different, however, as I'm going to take some time to optimize our gameplay and show off where we are at this point in our design. I hope to see you there so that we can show off our polished work, as well as a few other assets I planned on adding to our gameplay loop. Until next time, and remember, go out, make an impact.